Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN right here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney hanging out with you on this Tuesday. Lots to get to on this show. Going to ride solo here with you today. We have Jim Saunas of Number Fire stopping by tomorrow. We're going to preview the Minnesota Vikings. Like I said yesterday, I think we've done every single team except for a handful. But Jim follows the Vikings very closely and I'd like to get his thoughts on a couple players and a couple targets that he has for fantasy football. That's tomorrow. We have Chelsea Messenger. She's going to drop by on Thursday as well. Her heart is very close to the Titans, so we will talk a little bit about the Tennessee Titans, but same sort of deal. Get her thoughts on a couple players, a couple teams. She does some fantastic work, and she always has like a couple sharp picks. So really looking forward to some guests later on in this week, but bear with me, riding solo here today on a Tuesday. Going to talk a lot about rankings here on this show. We're going to wrap up with the wide receiver breakout sleepers busts from yesterday. We're going to dive into the top 20 quarterbacks, same sort of deal, highlight some busts, some breakouts, maybe some undervalued quarterbacks, especially those that like to play in superflex leagues. And then we will dive into tight end rankings as well. So lots of fantasy football talk on this show. We're going to wrap up Mean Streets with my favorite MLB picks and props. And we've been doing okay. I want to give a shout out to MLB Picks and Props Around the Diamond. It's a brand new show. We're just like a couple weeks in now. You can catch it live on our FTN Network YouTube page at 1:30 Eastern or on Game Plus Network Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 Eastern, where we break down the MLB slate and we have a couple picks each. Myself, Frank Brank, and MLB Dream. Yesterday, we went 5 for 6 on that show. I think the only one we didn't get was Marcus Stroman over 4.5 strikeouts. He was stuck on 4. He got rocked yesterday by the Nats. I'm going to pick on the Nats again here today. That was my pick. We did get a couple things, right as a team. I guess I let everybody down, with the perfect score there. But shout out to Dream, super sharp. I think he had Julio Urias over 5.5K. He got 6 against the Brew Crew. He had Baltimore over 3.5 team implied total against Yusei Kikuchi. What is going on with Kikuchi? Like, if you're the Jays, like, how can you throw this guy out anymore? I don't know if you can. Like, he's awful. We pick on this guy every single time he takes the ball. He's completed 6 innings, I think, in 3 of his 19-20 starts. He's basically allowing a home run in every start. He's walking nearly 4 batters per 9. He has a little bit of swing and miss, but man, this guy is not good. And if you're the Jays fighting for a playoff spot, there's only so much you can take. Like, how could you even roll him out there? Put him in the pen, maybe come out of the bullpen or something. Like, this guy could be the reason you don't even make the playoffs between him and Jose Barrios. Those two arms are really struggling. Barrios got rocked again by Cleveland the other day, and he has the highest barrel percentage in the big. So those two guys are really struggling, and I'm not surprised. You say Kikuchi's, I didn't really like that signing at the time, but Barrios should be a little bit better than this. So I got to see, he's got to turn it around if the Jays really want to solidify a playoff spot here down the stretch. It's going to be tight race. Jays and Orioles again today. Alek Manoah on the bump for the Bluebirds, and they are heavy favorites. But we do have some props and some picks a little bit later on in the show, which we'll dive into. But I wanted to give some love to, Frank and Dream. Those guys are both super sharp, and the show, like I said, is absolutely free. But if you're looking for, the betting package, because it is betting season now, we're right there. Football is just a couple weeks away, officially a couple weeks away from week 1. Rams and Bills, let's get it on. I'm excited. NHL is going to be here before you know it. That comes with the NBA as well. MLB picks all the way until the World Series is run, plus PGA picks and props, all that good stuff. Bogey free, you can catch Wednesday at Game Plus Network as well. I believe that one's at 6:30 Eastern. Lots of good stuff happening here on Game Plus Network and FTN Network as we inch closer to week 1 of the NFL season. I do have like kind of my stat of the day. It's not really like that significant of a single stat of a player. Yesterday we talked about what was it, Tyler, that we talked yesterday? It wasn't target share. Oh, it was air yards. So that's a free tool over at FTN Daily, FTNFantasy.com. This one is as well. Tyler, let's show the people the aDOT leaders last year in the NFL. Courtland Sutton, you guys have heard me talk about this at length. Tyler, when I run through this, maybe you have the Courtland Sutton board as well, like in the system here that you can check up in a minute. But Courtland Sutton, this is aDOT, average depth of target. So you see 15.4 yards was the average depth of target for Courtland Sutton last season. Now, he didn't reel in a lot of those catches, of course, because he had brutal play at the quarterback position, whether it was Drew Lock or whoever the heck they threw out there in Denver last year. This year, they have the number 1 passer. 19% of Russell Wilson's pass attempts last season went at least 20 yards. That was the most in the NFL. He had the most pass attempts of 20 yards. 74 was tied with Josh Allen, but he had fewer games played, 14 compared to 17 from Mr. Allen. But this is, like I said multiple times on the show, it's a match made in heaven. Courtland Sutton, right? You see Tyler Lockett, number 2, 14.6. These guys have play similar, they run similar routes, finesse ball, left side of the field, mostly for these guys. Russell Wilson chucking it to the left side of the field is something that he really likes to do. We have all those statistics over at FTNfantasy.com, direction of passes and things like that, first reads. And Lockett was one of the, guys for Russell Wilson. And it's just, you take away Lockett, you give him Sutton. I'm really excited about this duo. I think he is an absolute game changer, Courtland Sutton, but he was number 1, Devontae Smith, number 3, Van Jefferson in there. And of course, if you remember, Jefferson wasn't really, that consistent in the Rams offense last season, more so when Woods was sidelined, but then they got OBJ. But when Van Jefferson was on the field, he usually got a deep shot. He struggled with some drops. I still believe in him overall. I think he could be a sneaky little play in best ball or deeper leagues. Maybe we're talking about him halfway through the season as a guy to, plug in there and you can put him in bye week replacements, injuries, things like that. But he does have a high aDOT in this offense, and I think that will continue. Mike Evans in there, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf. So 2 Seahawks in there, Jamar Chase. Marquez Callaway makes the list, but of course there's a lot going on there in New Orleans this year that wasn't the case last year. Michael Thomas looks healthy. Chris Olave was drafted. They signed veteran Jarvis Landry and then Justin Jefferson in there as well. But it's all about Courtland Sutton for me. Inside the top 10 in terms of deep targets, deep target percentage. And there we go. 17 targets of at least 20 yards. He was also inside the top 10, I think top 5 in terms of just his percentage of targets that were at least 20 yards down the field. And then Russell Wilson, we just talked about him and how accurate he is as a quarterback, especially pushing the ball deep down the field. A couple news items before we get out of here. Just quick time. Miles Sanders dealing with a hamstring injury. He is sidelined today at practice. That's going to make everybody oh so happy that a lot of people are out on Miles Sanders, are in on Kenneth Gainwell. What I said last week is Kenneth Gainwell definitely has the lock. The role is locked down. That's where I was going with that. In terms of third down, he's a great pass catcher. He was an amazing pass catcher, I believe, in Memphis, and he showed that last season with the Eagles in his rookie year. But I don't believe he's going to be a guy that runs between the tackles. Like, you go look at his carries last season, and they mostly came when Sanders was either hurt or they were just down in games or up in games. And they blew out a lot of teams towards the end of the last season. They played a lot of mediocre teams, the Jets and the Giants and the Washington towards the end of last season. And they blew out those teams, and Detroit, one of them as well. And then Kenneth Gainwell got some play, but not a great start for Miles Sanders on the last year of his contract. I'm sure the Eagles want to, run him into the ground as much as they can, but he's got to stay healthy because he has had numerous injuries over the short course of his career, whether it's a hammy a couple times, a foot, an ankle, a knee. He's had some things happen to him. I think he broke his hand as well. So he has had some injuries, but not a good start for him and a great start for everybody who likes Kenneth Gainwell. Antonio Gibson reports today that he is practicing with the punt team and the third down offense. Yesterday, we chatted about him a little bit. Not great. Not a great start. He's clearly on my bust list. You guys have heard me talk about this for 2 years. It is nothing against Antonio Gibson. It's just mostly the coaching staff and how they use him. Now, he fumbled in the first preseason game. Brian Robinson came in, got some play with the first team offense, and got a short yardage touchdown, which is something that I expect to continue to happen as we get into this season. A big body back that should handle the goal line work and steal some first down and second down touches from Gibson. And we know how much they like J.D. McKissic inside the top 5 in catches since 2019 among running backs, just a couple years removed from 80-plus grabs. So Brian Robinson is a guy that's trending up, and he's not really costing you a whole lot. And Gibson will continue to fall. Reported at ESPN that Dameon Pierce could be the lead running back in Houston over time. No crap. Obviously, I like to drink bats. I like to drink bats after Puck League. After my beer league hockey, I like to have a bat. It's obvious. And this is obvious too. He's clearly the back to own in Houston between Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead. That's a bogus. It's not a bogus report. It's so obvious. But Dameon Pierce, let's not be shocked here that Pierce could be the lead in Houston as early as week 1. And then Bill Belichick had some nice things to say about Ramondre Stevenson yesterday. He said he saw that he is improved. as a pass catcher and a pass blocker, which is really, really key because Damian Harris doesn't get on the field in third downs. Trust me, he doesn't. I owned the guy a lot last year in a lot of spots, and we saw a lot of goal line work from him. Games with 20 plus carries, maybe one catch here and there, but I saw a lot of Brennan Bolden last year. I know Bolden joined Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas, but we could see Ramondre Stevenson maybe own that James White role, right? Maybe be that guy who gets a few carries into the backfield as well as some third down work. And if New England's playing from behind, it certainly won't be Damian Harris on the field. And that's the one issue that I have with Harris. I like to draft running backs who have a chance to stay on the field for 3 downs. Could maybe be a bell cow back for the squad. That's it. We'll take a quick break. We're going to dive into wide receivers before we get into quarterbacks and tight ends on Mean Streets. Keep her locked.
I can't say enough about what we've got going on over at FTNBets.com.
At FTN Bets, your bankroll can be profitable. With the FTN Bet Tracker, you can tell your favorite experts across all sports, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball.
Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. I'm your host, Chris Meaney.
And with our premium content, you can take your bets to the next level. Only $49.99 a month. Use the tools the pros use at FTN. Our betting models run over 100,000 simulations of every game, with sides and totals in the NFL, the NBA, and more. Use the home run predictor to see who'll hit a bomb deep. Our NFL player projections will make you a DFS king. And the FTN Prop Shop always finds the best odds for your player props. All tools, projections, and models are powered by FTN Data.
Welcome back in. Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. Going to dive into some wide receivers, sleepers, breakouts, busts, rookies to own, PPR gold, all that good stuff here. In case you missed towards the end of yesterday's show, we kind of touched on it, but we were, of course, short for time. So let's get into it. If you're looking for my top 40 wide receiver rankings, just want to say that everything from me personally is available for free on our YouTube page, FTN Network. We've been talking a lot about it on Game Plus. If you're just catching and you want to see my top 40 wide receivers, you can hop on over to our FTN Network YouTube page, smash that like button. You have any comments, any questions, you can leave them there. But also we have a link to my top 10, top 20, top 40, undervalued wide receivers, breakouts. But I'm hoping that everything is just right in here for you that you can take to your draft. But also, something that we didn't mention off the top of the show that we have been doing, the promo code Meaney will save you 20% over at ftnfantasy.com if you're looking to be part of the FTN Fantasy crew. Jeff Ratcliffe was the #1 ranker in the game last season, and we have all kinds of content over at FTN Fantasy, whether it's, busts, breakouts, sleepers, best ball, team previews, new coaching schemes. We really do have you covered. There's a lot of content over at ftnfantasy.com. We'll be with you throughout the entire season as well. Waiver wire rankings, projections, access to Discord channels, start and sit tools, 40 plus tools available over at ftnfantasy.com. So Tyler, whatever you want to do, we got 2 boards here. You want to throw out the sleepers. Okay, there you go. So we'll start here with the sleepers: KJ Osborne, Joshua Palmer, Nico Collins. So Collins in year number 2. There's just not a lot going on in Houston, right? You see on the right, Brandon Cooks, undervalued. I really do believe he is one of the most undervalued wide receivers in fantasy football. you could look at his whole career and just take fantasy aside, right? This is a guy who's with the Saints, and the Saints traded him away. The Rams traded him away. The Pats traded him away, despite being really good on those 3 teams, and now a member of the Texans. And I think a lot of people had questions about Brandon Cooks. Certainly there were some concussion issues and concerns for him. It's nice to see that he was, healthy and able to stay on the field last year. But I think most of the questions were, Brandon Cooks, really good wide receiver, linked to the Houston Texans. They stink. Davis Mills, a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position with him. But Mills is pretty good last year. One of the better rookies, actually. He had some moments. And as we talked about yesterday, in terms of target share and air yards, Brandon Cooks was inside the top 10 in both. He had like a 30% target share, nearly 40% of his team's air yards. Those are numbers that I don't think will change. Like, they didn't do a whole lot. Now, Mechie is not going to be with the team, and we wish him all the best this season. But other than that, right, we're looking at Nico Collins, Brevin Jordan. These are 2 guys that I like, Collins and Jordan. But Brandon Cooks is going to be the guy there. He's probably going to finish inside the top 10 or 12 in targets again this season. He will get a lot of volume, and he finished as a top 20 wide receiver last year and the year before that. And I think most people, and I'll be honest, like with my buddies, super sharp in fantasy football drafts, they just don't want Cooks, and they'll see him linked to Houston. They see the quarterback play, see the bad team, and they say, nah, no thanks. I'll take another wide receiver. And that creates value because he falls down draft boards. You can get him roughly as wide receiver 24, 25. And I've seen him go, around wide receiver 30. So I think there's terrific value for Brandon Cooks. Don't be worried about the quarterback play. It's all about volume and opportunity. The Texans will be playing from behind quite often this season, and they will be chucking nonstop. Adam Thielen on the board for undervalued, and Tyler Boyd as well. If you do have the Thielen, you can chuck that up, Tyler, but if not, all good. He's just a touchdown machine. He really is. You got Kevin O'Connell moving over to Minnesota. He was the offensive coordinator with the LA Rams last year. They ran more wide receiver 3 sets than any team in the league, and that will be the case here in Minnesota. Maybe not more than any team in the league, but they're going to run more wide receiver threat sets. That's why I like KJ Osborne, who really had a strong, it was his second season last year. It wasn't his rookie season. I see people talking about it being his rookie season. Now, he didn't play at all in his rookie season, so I understand that. But this is year 3 for KJ Osborne, who was a big part of the game script last season. A new coaching staff in here, but I like his upside, and he's basically free. That's why I got him as a sleeper. I think he'll return value. But look at this for Thielen. He's just a touchdown machine, right? He really is. Air yards, target share, healthy, aDOT, not a big, deep guy down the field, but great hands, runs terrific routes, a red zone threat for sure. Like, Kirk Cousins definitely has a connection with Adam Thielen. 24 touchdowns in the last 28 games for Adam Thielen, 39 in his last 54. He finished as wide receiver 28 last season, 15.4 fantasy points per game. He's going roughly wide receiver 34. I got him slightly ranked higher than that. So he's a guy that, I think he'll outperform his ADP yet again. It's not all Justin Jefferson, guys. It's just not going to be all Justin Jefferson. Thielen's going to be sprinkled in. KJ Osborne's going to be sprinkled in as well. We'll see if Irv Smith can take that leap forward. Back to the board there, Tyler. Take a look at a couple of guys. Tyler Boyd as well is another one that I feel is undervalued. We saw last season towards the end of the year, they really took the training wheels off of Joe Burrow. He was coming from a knee injury, a significant knee injury, and he wasn't chucking as much as he did as a rookie. The offensive line is much improved in Cincinnati. They've done a great job through free agency in the draft over the past couple of years to add pieces to that offensive line. And Tyler Boyd is just a really good wide receiver. He's a slot guy. A lot of the attention, of course, is going to be on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. These guys are both getting drafted as top 12 wide receivers. And Tyler Boyd's going in like the 50s. And he finished inside the top 40 of the last few weeks of the season. He's a really good wide receiver. He doesn't have the upside to be a wide receiver 2 and maybe just a low end 3. But towards the end of your draft, if you're just looking to pile some wide receivers, injuries are going to happen. You got to run into you're going to run into bye weeks. Hopefully nothing happens to Chase or Higgins, but my goodness, if something happens to one of those two guys, you all of a sudden have a top 24, 25 wide receiver in Tyler Boyd. The breakouts, everybody's in on Gabriel Davis. I understand it. Rashad Bateman, Brendan Ayuk. And you see Deebo Samuel is a bit of a bust for me. So Deebo is just, he's a terrific player. And I think the offense will continue to run through him, and he's got incentives in his contract where, if he has 3 rushing touchdowns, he gets a bonus. If he gets 350 rushing yards, he gets a bonus. He didn't want to be treated as a running back. If he wanted to be a running back, he'd be a running back. I don't blame him. He didn't want to take like 12 to 15 shots behind the line of scrimmage, carrying the ball out of the backfield. But towards the end of the season, I actually started to see his rushing yard prop higher than his receiving yard prop. And it was strange from a guy who really averaged like 70 plus receiving yards, before the final few weeks of the season. He was just a guy that, you can get 100 yards out of him, and he only had to have like 4 or 5 catches. He's really explosive with the ball in his hands. In fact, San Fran got a lot of players like that. Ayuk is one of them, and so is George Kittle. But now we have a change at the quarterback position. You go from Jimmy Garoppolo over to Trey Lance, who likes to call his own number, and he's a terrific runner in his own right. He started 2 games last year and he had 130 rushing yards. So I think we'll see Debo get scaled back a little bit in terms of rushing yards, and who knows how accurate Trey Lance is going to be. Say what you want about Jimmy G, he clearly wasn't the answer. But it could be a bit of a learning curve here for Trey Lance as a rookie. And last year in camp and this year in camp, there seems to be a connection with Brandon Ayuk as the deep guy in this offense, higher aDOT. Lance has got a deep ball, deeper than Jimmy Garoppolo. May not be as accurate, but there could be some Josh Allen comparisons. We'll see in a couple of years if Lance, it can take that leap forward. We've yet to really see him, so how can we even say that? But I do believe there will be some growing pains from Trey Lance at the start of the season. But I like Ayuk. I think he could break out and be a 1,000-yard wide receiver. And Gabe Davis, I was in on Gabe Davis this time last year. I had him, my bold prediction as a top 15 wide receiver. Towards the end of his rookie season, I believe he had 4 touchdowns in his final 5 games. And then last year he came on strong as well. I think he may have had 5 in his final 6. And then he had 1 in the first postseason game. And of course, he had 4 touchdowns in that Kansas City Chiefs game. I would still be in on him regardless, right? As I told you, it's the bold prediction from last year that I was completely wrong on, but I liked what I saw from him involved in the red zone, the trust of Josh Allen. Emmanuel Sanders was signed, and then, it was just, even though Sanders wasn't doing anything, he was just on the field, and it was annoying. And Cole Beasley was there too. Then they bring in Jamison Crowder, and Isaiah McKenzie seems to have that slot role already kind of solidified. And it's kind of telling, right? Isaiah McKenzie didn't play in the first preseason game. Crowder's out there, and Crowder hasn't been able to stay healthy. I do like Isaiah McKenzie, but Gabe Davis does have the trust of Josh Allen. There's clearly a connection there with those two guys. He had more end zone targets than Stephon Diggs over the last 4 weeks of the season. His snap counts had risen in each single week, and now he's into year 3 in this offense, which is going to be one of the better offenses in football. Now, it's a steep price to pay. If he didn't have the 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs in the playoff game, maybe he's wide receiver 35 or wide receiver 40, but I think even as wide receiver 30 on average over at NFFC over the last 4 weeks, I think he's a really, really strong target. And I think he's going to break out. He could, I don't know if he's going to be a 1,000-yard guy. He probably won't be. But man, in this offense, I would not be shocked if he had double-digit touchdowns. I would not be shocked. And you want a guy linked to this Bills offense, that's for sure. It's a good stack. If you don't get Diggs in the first, early second, you can get Allen, you can get Davis, you can pair him up with Knox if you're playing some best ball and things like that. Rashad Bateman was on that list as well. I mean, it's just what's going on in Baltimore. They have the cheapest wide receiver room in the NFL. They don't have anybody. They traded Marquise Brown away. This is why we love Andrews, who can finish his tight end 1 again. 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards is certainly in play for him again. But Rashad Bateman, very small sample size, but I really liked what I saw from him last year. Lamar Jackson, right, beefing up. Maybe, he looks a little stronger. Maybe that deep ball is going to be even deeper this year. But you see the note on the right. Current wide receiver group has 118 career receptions. Devin Duvernay's in there. This don't have many options, right? So Rashad Bateman, the air yards in the target share, that's low. I expect, and this is a run first team, but they're going to have to throw the football. I expect the target share to be roughly 20%, at least 20%, air yards over 20% as well. I expect Andrews to be the guy inside the red zone and probably the number 1 option for Lamar Jackson, but you see where he's going, wide receiver 31 on average. I got him as a top 25 wide receiver. Let's bring up that list one more time, Tyler, and then we'll break and we'll dive into other things that I have here. So actually, that's kind of it. Like AJ Brown and Tyler Lockett, right? Tyler Lockett's been boom or bust his whole career with a really good quarterback. I know that there's good value there as wide receiver 40, but give me Kadarius Toney in around that range instead. It's just, if there's boom or bust with Russell Wilson, there's going to be probably more bust than boom with Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Let's be honest, right? I showed you the board at the start of the show with the high aDOT from Cortland Sutton, and he didn't have the same type of season as Tyler Lockett. It was a lot more of bust games and then boom for Cortland Sutton. I think that'll be the case for Lockett. Unfortunately, he's a really good player, but I got some major questions about the quarterback position. And then A.J. Brown, right? He goes from one run-heavy team to another run-heavy team with other options. In Tennessee, it was just A.J. Brown. They got nothing out of Julio Jones. There was nothing really at the tight end position. And so you give him a 27% target share in Tennessee. If he has a 27% target share in Philly with the way that they kind of run as well, even though Jalen Hurts threw the ball, I think their preseason game, the first 9 plays were all passing attempts. Maybe that's a statement. I don't know. But A.J. Brown also has Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith to deal with as well. I think he's a terrific player. I think it's a really good get. I just don't think he's a top 10 wide receiver. I think he's going to be like a top 20, middle, maybe he finishes wide receiver 15, 16. He's just not getting drafted that way. And if you're getting drafted as a top 10, top 11 wide receiver and you don't return value that early, I think that is worthy of a bust candidate. And then Joshua Palmer is just a guy that I really like. And I think we'll start to see him grow more in this offense. He was actually the first wide receiver that they drafted for Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen, of course, is number 1. And, Mike Williams is the high upside guy inside that offense, higher aDOT, end zone target leader, top 5 in the NFL last year. And then Gerald Everett's going to be involved, Eckler catching balls in the backfield. So it might be a small role for Joshua Palmer, but we could see him continue to grow. And I think we will inside this offense. We're actually going to keep the balance of the show, and actually have a couple more wide receivers that I want to address with you guys as well. So keep her locked.
I can't say enough about what we've got going on over at FTNBets.com.
At FTN Bets, your bankroll can be profitable. With the FTN Bet Tracker, you can tell your favorite experts across all sports, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball.
Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. I'm your host, Chris Meaney.
And with our premium content, you can take your bets to the next level. Only $49.99 a month. Use the tools the pros use at FTN. Our betting models run over 100,000 simulations of every game, with sides and totals in the NFL, the NBA, and more. Use the home run predictor to see who'll hit a bomb deep. Our NFL player projections will make you a DFS king. And the FTN Prop Shop always finds the best odds for your player props. All tools, projections, and models are powered by FTN Data.
Welcome back in. Where were the rookies? Where were the rookies on that previous board? They were nowhere to be found, but I got a couple here. Some rookies to roster in redraft leagues. I tried to avoid some of the top dogs. Like I like Drake London. I'm kind of out on Treylon Burks. I understand there's a real possibility for him to lead the team in targets, but part of it is what's going on in camp. I don't want to dive into it too much. I don't fully believe, it's a problem. He's running wrong routes, and it's going to take some time for him to learn the playbook. And then there's asthma reports and things. He's a really good wide receiver, and I think over time he will be a really good wide receiver in the league. But I'm kind of out on Treylon Burks. I have no issue with Drake London, even though he suffered the knee injury. I was just trying to dig a little bit deeper in terms of wide receivers that I would like to own personally. And Sky Moore is my favorite Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver to roster. Juju could be okay. He's a couple years removed from 90+ catches. He's been a pain in the butt over the past couple years to own. I think there's a ceiling there and upside, and him moving from Big Ben to Patrick Mahomes is a significant upgrade. But I'm really excited about Sky Moore. I think he can do a lot of things with him. I liked him out of college. He could stretch the field. They can do some end arounds with him. Bubble screens. I think he's pretty explosive. I think he could be a top 40 wide receiver, and he's not getting drafted that way. The George Pickens thing was actually before Byron came on the show, Brian Cook, and talked up George Pickens, and then he had a pretty good showing in the preseason. He had some really nice things to say, and I agreed. I think Pickens was, one of my favorite wide receivers coming out of the draft, and I think, Christian Watson went ahead of him, and I thought that at the time that was a mistake, and remains to be seen. But a big body wide receiver can go up and get it. He's very physical. There's going to be some question marks at the quarterback play for sure in Pittsburgh, but he's not costing you a whole lot. He might jump up a little bit now with the preseason. That's kind of how things work, but he's still a pretty good pick. I really like Alec Pierce. I know a lot of people like Pierce Campbell. I'm not a huge believer in Campbell. I root for him to get on the field and stay healthy. Of course, I'm not rooting for anyone to fail in the NFL. But this is a guy that just has not been able to stay healthy. At the start of camp, it looked good for him. He was getting on the field in some 2 wide receiver sets, where last year it was just only 3, and they didn't run a lot of 3 in Indy last year, run for his team, and he just couldn't get on the field. And there's been some issues with injuries, and T.Y. Hilton's not on the squad. Some reports maybe they can bring him back, but Alex Pierce, I think, is a guy that's basically free. I would, I have a lot of shares of him, and somebody's got to step up here as the number 2 in Indy. And I think it could be Pierce. Game changers, already talked a lot about Courtland Sutton. If you're just joining the show, big aDOT guy, Russell Wilson, big aDOT guy, very accurate, one of the better deep balls in the game that we've ever seen here. And I just think it's a match made in heaven for those two. Marquise Brown, right? No DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 weeks of the season. There's a connection there with Brown and with Kyler. We saw it in Oklahoma. I don't want to dive into that too much. We are seeing this around the league, whether it's Waddle and Tua and Smith and Hurts and now Brown and Kyler and, others that have escaped my memory at the moment, but we're seeing this around the league. Devontae Adams and Derek Carr is one for sure. But Marquise Brown, really good season last year, a breakout season, over 1,000 yards, dealt with some drops, but, much better than Christian Kirk, and will give the Cardinals much more than Christian Kirk gave them. I'm in on Rondale Moore as a potential breakout, and Zach Ertz on the squad with a couple other tight ends there as well. But I think we're really going to see Marquise Brown thrive in this offense. And maybe we're talking about him as a sell high candidate after the first few weeks if he balls out with Hopkins coming back. But I have high expectations for him. I think he can be a top 20 wide receiver, and he's not getting drafted that way. And Michael Thomas, right? Let's be honest. He's a total game changer. We don't know what to expect from him. We haven't seen him in a couple of years. We just don't know. No Sean Payton, no Drew Brees. How's this going to roll? Bringing Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry. There's a lot of different moving pieces there with the Saints. Last year they were a run-heavy team, played at a slow pace, kind of scaled it back from Jameis. Maybe that was part of it. They didn't want Jameis to throw 40 plus times like he did in Tampa and throw all these picks. And he was very efficient last year, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think Jameis is an interesting quarterback to own in superflex leagues. But Michael Thomas, for where he's going, I think he's certainly worth the risk around wide receiver 37, 38. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you're not spending a top 4 or 5 pick on him. He certainly is still a very talented wide receiver. Let's see if he can stay on the field. I'm certainly, I'm going to take some shots. There's no question. PPR Gold, Hunter Renfrow, Kadarius Toney, Robert Woods, as I mentioned, I do believe Woods will be the lead there. He's a guy that I project over 100 targets in this offense. He's not a great X receiver. It's not really how he should be used. He's a great run blocker. We know that the Titans want to run the football. I just feel like we're going to see a lot of games from Woods where he has 5 or 6 grabs for 60, 70 yards. And that's pretty good in a PPR league. At least you can get you double-digit points for guys going outside the top 40 at the wide receiver position. And I'll be hammering his catch props. I can see it right now. Week 1, 4.5 plus money. Just give it to me. Kadarius Toney, it's the only giant I want inside this offense in terms of wide receivers. I just don't feel like Kenny Golladay and Daniel Jones it's just not a good fit, right? It's Daniel Jones struggles with that accuracy, and I think Kenny Golladay struggles with separation. And I just like Toney, man, in the slot, great route runner. He's going to be a guy I think racks up a lot of catches in the slot. And Sterling Shepard's still in the squad, but just think about Shepard in those games that he had with Daniel Jones over the past couple of years when he's healthy, right? There's been so many 8 or 9 catch games. It was just slot. I just feel like Toney will take that role over, and Slayton will just be Slayton is also an afterthought, but so will Shepard. And then Renfrow in the slot. I think the guy to fade in the Raiders offense is Darren Waller. Honestly, I've said this before a couple times, with Josh Josh McDaniels and how he ran his offense in New England. We could view Randy Moss and Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow as Wes Welker in the slot. I just think he's a terrific route runner. He's got great hands. He's a mismatch in the middle of the field, third down, whether it's in the red zone. But let's be honest. I mean, he's not going to get the same type of volume that he got last year. He's not going to get a ton of targets. He's not going to be like, he had 128 targets last year and 103 grabs, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. He had a really good season. He was one of the better waiver wire pickups of last year, but he's not going to be that guy that I wouldn't imagine he catches 100 balls, but I think he can get like mid 80s. I think he can get up to the 80 range. I can get like 7 touchdowns still. And I think he can get over 100 targets, but he can be very efficient with it. And then stashes, Isaiah McKenzie, KJ Hamler, because no Tim Patrick, very explosive, but he's dealt with some injuries. Let's see if he can get on the field. Romeo Dobbs would be like, stash? What do you mean? This guy's climbing up draft boards. How can I even just roster him and stash him? If he gets to the point where he's more expensive than Christian Watson, maybe I just take Watson. But Dobbs is a guy that I do believe is worthy of a late round pick, and it could take some time for him to build the trust with Aaron Rodgers. And then Isaiah McKenzie is another guy, right, who's jumped up draft board significantly over the past few weeks, but I think he's kind of got that slot role locked in. Could be some inconsistencies from him in games. Like, I don't know if he's going to be a guy that you can really trust to roll in. It's like maybe just like a flex guy in a PPR league, things like that. But you want a guy linked to this Bills offense, as I mentioned earlier, and a cheap play there. All right, that's it. We're saying goodbye to wide receivers. Bye-bye for now. And we're going to dive into my top quarterbacks here on Game Plus Network. Stay tuned. Let's take a look at my top 10 quarterbacks. Of course, it can be found at ftnfantasy.com, but right here, live and free for you. No surprises up at the top. Really, this is my 5. I've kind of tinkered around a little bit. I've had Patrick Mahomes at 4 and 5. I've had Jalen Hurts at 3, but this is how my projections play out. Josh Allen's been a top quarterback in fantasy football in each of the past 2 seasons. I don't really see that changing. Herbert could take the throne. He's pretty close, but I think the biggest difference I see in drafts from this would be maybe Herbert falls to 3 and 4. Mahomes goes 2. People have been aggressive on Jalen Hurts. I've seen him go as high as 3 in certain drafts. You got the rushing upside there with Jackson, Hurts, and Murray. You got that rushing floor. Even though Kyler, if you look at last year and you look at his second year, I mean, he's progressed from an accuracy standpoint in each of his seasons in the NFL. But he did struggle without DeAndre Hopkins. So did Arizona. They didn't have a winning record with him in the lineup. Remember, they started really strong. Kyler kind of suffered an injury again for the second straight year in the midway part of the season. And then we saw him kind of struggle overall. He didn't really have as many red zone opportunities or carries, and he was missing his guy in DeAndre Hopkins. But I still think I'm fine with him. I'm not going to fight anybody if they want to have him inside the top 5 here. I think if I'm labeling a bust in the top 5, it may be Patrick Mahomes, and I think he's a really, really good quarterback, but I'm not into taking these guys early. Like, I won't have any shares of Allen, Herbert, or Mahomes. I just won't. I'm not into taking a quarterback within my first 40 picks. It's not for me in a single quarterback league. I just don't like to do it. Best ball, sure. Make a case for anybody in best ball. Have whatever stack you want. Super flex, absolutely. Allen's going to go pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, and I get it. I'm actually kind of fine with it. And super flex, if I'm near the end of the first, I kind of just take the value at running back and wide receiver if all the quarterbacks are going to go off the board. And then I try to get myself maybe, somebody on this list inside the top 10, whether a Burrow or a Lance and things like that. But another guy maybe could be a bust on this list could be Joe Burrow. On average, NFFC leagues, he's going as quarterback 4. I think that's pretty steep as quarterback 4. It's a much tougher schedule this year for the Bengals. Now, I like all their weapons. You got 2 wide receivers and Higgins and Chase going inside the top 12. So it's certainly warranted. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes a top 5 quarterback, but I don't want to spend a top 50 pick on Joe Burrow. In fact, I don't want to spend a top 50 pick on a quarterback at all, unless it's Lamar, Hurts. Like, these are guys that I feel like, well, you got the board there, Tyler, for Jalen Hurts. And what he did last season, finished his quarterback 6 in fantasy points per game last year, really giving you nothing in terms of his yards through the year, 3,100 yards. He only had 16 touchdowns. Now you're bringing A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert away from Zach Ertz. Devontae Smith in year 2 had 900 yards as a rookie against top coverage. So Hurts is set up to have a terrific season, not just a fantasy season, but a real good NFL season. And the Eagles are going to let him chuck. It will still be a run heavy offense, maybe not as much as last year. At the start of the season last year, they threw the ball so much. Nick Sirianni, a rookie coach, realized, like, let's play to the strengths. And the strengths of this team is the offensive line. It's one of the best, if not the best, in all of the NFL. He led all quarterbacks in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. So say we scale that back to maybe 650. Maybe we only give him 6 rushing touchdowns. You got to think he's going to throw for 3,500 yards, or he flirts with 20, 24, 25 passing touchdowns. So it'll all even out. Some questions about the accuracy. 61 completion percentage is not ideal. It's not awful for his first full season in the NFL. So I think he can improve as a passer. As you see, I got him as a top 5 quarterback. Back to that list there for a second, though. I'll get to some of these questions, guys, as I see you're asking them here in the chat. I will get to them in just a minute. Tom Brady's a guy that I've moved down quite a bit. I had him as a top 5 quarterback. He finished his QB3 last year. He led the NFL in passing attempts, passing yards, passing touchdowns. Nobody threw the ball more than Tampa Bay. In terms of pace of play, they played up-tempo, even though they blew teams out. They had 66% of the plays were passing attempts. So this was a team that really just pedal to the metal. And, they bring in Julio Jones, Russell Gage, and, even though Gronk is gone, Mike Evans has done nothing but turn out 1,000-yard seasons and double-digit touchdowns. I think he got like 27, 26 touchdowns in 2 years with Brady. So he's been a beast. Godwin's an absolute stud. I'm just a little concerned lately what's happening to the offensive line. So I've dropped him down a little bit, but I still view him as an undervalued quarterback because this is the range that he's going: quarterback 8, quarterback 9, quarterback 10. So that's what I mean about waiting it out a little bit at the position. Russell Wilson, change of scenery, 2 stud wide receivers. I believe Judy is going to be a stud in the NFL, and we know Cortland Sutton has the upside there, and he's got a beast of a tight end in Albert O, who could be a really, really good tight end from a fantasy standpoint as well, like a mismatch in the middle of the field. So I like Russ there, but the one guy I'll touch on here is Trey Lance, quarterback 9. You see, I've kind of moved him up a little as quarterback 12. This is from a while ago. I've jumped him up just a couple spots, and it's the rushing. Part of it is now I know that Jimmy G is not going to be a part of this team. They're trying to move him. They've officially turned the corner to Trey Lance, which is something I thought they were going to do last year, but you never know with this organization. It's hard to trust what these guys are going to do in San Fran. But you see the note on the right, and that's what it's all about. There's going to be some inconsistencies in his game. There's like 57.7 completion percentage, right? Everyone's hard on Jalen. Like 57 is awful. And there's going to be games where he doesn't really do anything through the air. He struggles maybe a couple picks, but the note on the right is the key. 120 rushing yards, 33 fantasy points in his 2 starts. That is significant. He's going to call his own number. Shanahan's going to set him up to succeed. He's got multiple guys that are yak monsters: George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. We talked earlier. He may have a higher aDOT than this, but that's a healthy aDOT right there for pushing the ball down the field. And I think I think he has upside to be like a top 5 quarterback, but I'm not breaking any news here. That's for sure. We are going to break one more time, dive into 11 to 20, and then I'll address some of the questions here. I see Deesh and Andrew Ford in the chat as well. Appreciate you guys. We'll dive into that after the break. Keep it locked. I see Juju Smith-Schuster is already hurt, sitting out practice today due to a knee injury. Again, not wishing any injuries on guys, but man, it's been a tough go for Juju. That's for sure. Let's address some of these questions here first before we get into 11 to 20. Andrew Ford means in a league where quarterback passing touchdown is 6 points, same as a rushing touchdown. Should I got Hurts at his current ADP or wait and hope Rodgers can do it again this year? I am out on Rodgers. We'll talk about it in a second, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it again this year. I think it's going to be a run-first offense. Man, if anything happens to Allen Lazard, it could be a real crapshoot in Green Bay this year. Like, who's going to be able to step up? You know, Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, a couple rookies, and Dobbs and Watson in there. So, I think it's okay to grab Hurts, but man, a 6-point passing touchdown, the strategy definitely changes. I'm more willing to, get a top quarterback at that point. Where I still probably won't do Allen or Mahomes or Herbert. Still slightly early for me. I don't like to spend that top 40 pick, but man, you got to address the quarterback position. You can't really wait. I would instead of wait on Rodgers, I think Hurts is fine. I really do think he could be a game changer this year. It's not because the Eagles banner is behind me. I just think he's set up perfectly, like I said in the last segment, to have success. So I think it's okay maybe to grab him at his current ADP and his 6-point Andrew. But I think if you want to wait it out at the quarterback position, like a guy like Derek Carr, I think Derek Carr, or maybe even, I don't know about Lance. I don't know about Lance in a 6-point, but you got that rushing floor, which is nice. But, with Derek Carr, maybe sometimes going after Rodgers. Let's bring up 11 to 20 and kind of walk through this. I think, some of these names on this list, a Stafford, waiting it out on a Stafford, waiting it out on a Carr. I think Cousins is actually okay in a 6-point passing league as well. We just talked about Thielen, right? Thielen has been a touchdown machine, and Cousins has finished as a top 15 quarterback over the past couple of years. He's kind of undervalued, and you got Justin Jefferson in there. You got an offensive-minded head coach now, which they just haven't had in Minnesota. So we could see maybe a higher ceiling here from Kirk Cousins. No, it's risky. You leave your draft, your home league with your buddies as Kirk Cousins is your number one QB in a 6-point passing touchdown. I understand that it's risky, but a Stafford or a Wilson, I would wait out maybe on those guys. Derek Carr, even Dak, right? Dak, I know he's only got a couple weapons there, but Michael Gallup comes back and we're still looking at that offense being one of the better ones. But Stafford, I know there's an elbow thing happening. That has made me move him a little bit down. I had him ahead of Russell Wilson. I could switch, but he's out there throwing at least. So that's a positive that he's out there chucking us some 60-yard bombs from Matthew Stafford there. So it's good news. Dak Prescott, right? I mean, this was one of the best, if not the best. I mean, I think they led the NFL in as a team passing yards. I know Brady led overall, but as a team, it was, I do believe Dak, and certainly led the NFL in points per game. You know, you take away Amari Cooper, who's had a lot of good seasons in Dallas, 1,000 yards in every year, but his final one, I have some questions about the weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, but Dak Prescott could still ball out and be a quarterback one. Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers. I just, like I said earlier, I have some concerns with Rodgers, a little bit older there. I think it's going to be a run first team. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes with like 30 touchdowns and things, but I just don't think it's going to be the same type of season. Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Jameis Winston, and Jared Goff. Derek Carr, we can switch over to the other board with some breakouts and things like that, Tyler, if you do have it there handy. But Derek Carr, I feel like he could really, and I didn't know, do I put him as a sleeper? Do I put him undervalued? Do I put him as a breakout? I've talked a lot about him. He's a very accurate quarterback. Say what you want about his real life, game, but look at 2018, 69% completion rate, 2019, 70%, 67 in 2020, 68 last year. He's a very accurate quarterback. You could say he broke out last year with 4,800 yards is the most he's ever had, but he only had 23 passing touchdowns. So he's only had 30 plus touchdowns once. That came in 2015. That may have been the year he had Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree and had some MVP votes, but it was roughly in around that 2015, 2016 campaign. But now you add Devontae Adams to the squad. You got a mismatch in Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow and Josh McDaniels, who's an offensive mind. So I think he could break out to the point where he actually throws for 5,000 yards and throws for 30 touchdowns. He finished as quarterback 15 last year. He can finish as a top 10 quarterback. The touchdowns are going to increase. I already talked about Hurts and Lance. Undervalued with Brady. Let's keep an eye on the offensive line. Kirk Cousins mentioned him. Justin Fields. Sleepers on the left, Jameis Winston. I just think he's set up for success with a lot of weapons there. He can really hone in on his favorite target. And if that's Michael Thomas, we could see something special from those two guys. Jared Goff as well, right? I know, again, this is fantasy, people, not real life. Jared Goff certainly has some issues, but you bring Jameson Williams, DJ Chark, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's good. TJ Hawkinson, Swift can catch out of the backfield. Team that's going to be playing from behind, top 5 offensive line. And then Kenny Pickett. I think Trubisky's going to be the week 1 starter, but I think Kenny Pickett, you got to see what you got in Kenny Pickett, right? You draft him, Pit Boy, he's eventually going to play. There's no question. He's eventually going to play. I don't know when it'll be. He had a great first preseason game, that's for sure. I don't think Trubisky did anything wrong to lose that job. But Kenny Pickett showed a little bit of rushing upside. Still got some weapons. Deontay, Claypool, talked about Pickens in there as well. So Pat Freiermuth is a little bit of some upside at the tight end position as well. I like this from George. Conair, bust. Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz. I know, if you're looking for top bust, Patrick Mahomes going as quarterback 3, Joe Burrow going as a top 5 quarterback. Those guys may not return value. I think Mahomes, at the end of the day, still finishes as a top 6, top 7 quarterback. So how could I label him as a bust? And I'd be shocked if Burrow didn't finish as a top 10 quarterback. But Rodgers, don't be drafting him as a top 10 quarterback anymore. Daniel Jones, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Tyrod Taylor by week 4 or 5. And then Carson Wentz, right? So much pressure. I don't think there's a quarterback who's more pressure to succeed this year than Carson Wentz. He's back inside the NFC East on his 3rd team in 3 years, and I don't think he's going to be all that great for the Commanders. 2 quarterback strategy, Deesh, if you missed it. With Jeff Ratcliffe, kind of wait until round 10, maybe not that late, but wait until, if you got to pick at the end of the first, you can wait and attack it, with guys that are going outside the top 10 of the quarterback position. Seek that value at running back and at wide receiver if everybody's going quarterback heavy. That's kind of the way that I look at things. I think Jeff is on the same page. We got one more segment here. We're going to wrap up with my favorite MLB picks and props for today's slate. See you in a couple. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you, wrapping up the show. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Here's a couple MLB picks and props for this evening. Let's lead with Justin Steele, pitcher of the Chicago Cubs. Got a pretty good matchup here against Washington. He's actually had a really good season. He checks in with a 3.63 ERA, 3.55 xFIP, a career high 9.38 K per nine. He keeps the ball on the ground 50% of the time, which is something that I like. His last start came against these Nationals, and 6 innings in his last start. 9 strikeouts against Washington. The start before that, he had 10 punch outs in that outing. So he's coming into a bit of a heater here. He's had at least 6K in 6 of his 8. And I'm surprised we're getting plus money here for this prop here for Justin Steele. So over 5.5 strikeouts for Mr. Steele. And for Washington, I know they don't strike out a ton, but if you look at the last 2 weeks, they're striking out more, 23% of the time. Of course, this is a different lineup without Juan Soto in it. So give me Steele over 5.5. If it gets up to 6.5, I'd take that as well. And a couple other props here for you and picks before we get out of here. Robbie Ray over 7.5 strikeouts, minus 126 over at FanDuel. A dream matchup against the Bad News Bears, aka Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or whatever the heck they're calling themselves these days. Robbie Ray, 2 starts against the Angels. He's racked up 20 strikeouts, 10 in each start against the Angels. And his last start, he did walk 2 guys. I think, 1.5 walks over minus 150. It's juice, but I think he can get there as well. I mean, this is a guy who does walk a little bit of guy, like almost 4 batters per 9. But ultimately, I like the strikeouts in there. Patrick Corbin, he's just a gas can. It doesn't matter who he goes up against. I mean, 5+ hits is something that he does pretty regularly. He's allowed 161 hits in 110 innings so far this season. And if the Red Sox can't beat the Pirates, then what are they even doing playing the game of baseball? Minus 135 with Nick Pivetta on the bump on the road against the Pirates. I like that one as well. For more, check out FTNBets.com. Good luck around the diamond. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.